Let's talk about this weird conversation, I guess, Twitter exchange that Kevin Durant had with a bunch of people on Twitter. Or really, I just want to talk more about the concepts that were brought up specifically in it. I don't necessarily actually want to dig into the specific tweets, but KD was doing what KD does, engaging with people on Twitter, which has positive and negative side effects. But he opened up the world of discourse, specifically about the concept of the term defense wins championships, because, of course, the counter of offense wins championships. You know, the phrase defense wins championships is often thrown around, the offense one being counter to it is Kevin Durant kind of trying to push against that status quo. And, you know, there was some discussion about what this meant about Kevin Durant as a player, and what it says about his mentality as a player. And I do think that is interesting, but also that people read into it a little too much. Like, as the resident Kevin Durant hater, he has been a good defender for many stretches of his career. Has he maybe been less good than he had the potential to be, given his length and speed and versatility? The fact that he was only like a plus defender, maybe half of the seasons of his career, or a significant plus defender for a few seasons, specifically when he was in Golden State's system. Sure, he could have been better, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Kevin Durant didn't play defense, which I've seen some people do. And I do think it more so speaks to, like, he had beef with the Golden State Warriors, for example, specifically because of how they used him offensively. I think he just didn't really realize how much the defense that the Warriors were providing was contributing to their success. And I mean, if you take a look at pretty much any other team throughout Kevin Durant's career, there were a couple of good defensive teams, particularly when they had Serge Ibaka getting 8 blocks a game. Definitely one of my favorite role players of all time. Probably too good to even be considered a role player, but whatever. Otherwise, he's not really had that many good defensive teams around him. And obviously, you see, he's had his hand in the decision making of every franchise he's been in since Golden State. So, like, with the Nets and with the Suns, he has had influence on the decisions they make. And apparently, Kevin Durant was pretty heavily campaigning for the Bradley Beal trade. I will say, didn't seem like he campaigned that hard for the James Harden deal. But either way, the direction the franchise went was just always, we're gonna go for guys who can get buckets. And in the regular season, the Nets and the Phoenix Suns in those 8 games they played with Kevin Durant looked ridiculous offensively. Obviously, the Suns looked kind of ridiculous offensively at times. So, yeah, there's a lot of investment in the offense. And obviously, we expect the Phoenix Suns offense to be spectacular this season when you have that many guys who are that elite at creating for themselves, and a little bit for others. So yeah, there's definitely an offensive minded approach from Kevin Durant, which is to be expected from the second best scorer of all time, in my personal opinion. Hello everybody, welcome to Oscar Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference in how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Also, I just want to say real quick, because I don't think I've mentioned it in any specific video. Maybe I did. If I did, forgive me. I'm going to be streaming my podcast on this channel from now on every Thursday at 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you're here for those shows. We're going to be talking about all kinds of weird stuff this off season. Of course, you want to be there when the season starts. But yeah. Anyways, I want to talk about not just Kevin Durant, but rather the idea of offense versus defense, what matters more. And I think there's this conversation should be explicitly nuanced. And by nature of how Twitter works, the conversation hasn't been nuanced, because that's just not how it works. Kevin Durant even said that a lot of people seem to be interpreting what he was said as, I think offense is more important, therefore I hate and have no respect for defense, because that's not what the man said. He simply implied it's the most important factor. Now, me personally, I've actually had a little bit of an issue with the phrase defense wins championships in the past, because I think, frankly, it's pretty reductive and silly to suggest as though it's that simple, as though like you can be this great defensive team and ass on offense and win championships that way. The only team I can think of throughout all of NBA history that was straight up ass on offense, like I'm talking, I believe, bottom 5 in the league, and then just an immaculate defense, it'd be the '04 Pistons. Otherwise, not really any team that wasn't pretty good at least on one end of the floor and excellent on another. And of course, many teams were excellent on both ends, given that they were championship teams. But my overarching point, it's both matter. Like I could tell you as someone who's been a fan of a lot of really good defensive teams that can't play offense. And by fan, I mean begrudgingly, because I'm a Chicago Bulls fan, the amount of Bulls teams that have been put in front of me throughout my entire life that have been, this team can really play defense, but man, it's kind of hard to score. The only time I ever got any kind of break from that was the 2015 Bulls and the 30 games of the 2021-22, I think was the, Bulls. Other than that, it's been rough. It's been a lot of teams. I think there's been a handful of teams that have ranked top 5 in defense in the league, including the Bulls last year, but they can't score worth shit. Even when they had plus offensive players, they couldn't score worth shit. There are very few good offensive teams for the Bulls over the last few years that are also excellent on defense. So if you take that formula, generally speaking, it's not going to win for you, especially in eras that are not specifically one side of the ball minded. And I know a lot of people think that the NBA is explicitly offensive minded now. The reality is the explosion of spacing has just made it a fundamentally different game. And because of that, a fundamentally more difficult game to defend. As a result, more offense happens because it's harder to defend. But that does not mean that teams do not respect or care about defense. And that kind of goes for like the 90s and 2000s as well. But I will say just that lack of spacing, it makes the offense pretty rough in retrospect to what we have now. Offenses look much less smooth. Bad shots are way more often the result at the end of a possession. You get what I'm saying. But, you know, maybe in an era like 2004 when the league was very much defensive oriented because of the lack of spacing, and of course there were rules that were more oriented towards defense, the NBA definitely went in a more offensive approach pretty much from after that season. Actually, I think that's when a lot of the defensive rules got tightened up quite a bit. Where am I even going with this? Yeah, what I'm saying is it doesn't really work that way, where it's all defense, no offense. And it doesn't really work the other way either. The Denver Nuggets obviously were one of the most impressive offensive teams I've seen in my entire life, but they were also really good defensively throughout this entire postseason run, especially Nikola Jokic, who pretty much dispelled any narrative of him being a poor defender for forever now. Aaron Gordon had a great defensive playoffs. Michael Porter Jr. did. Jamal Murray did really well. Bruce Brown and Christian Brown obviously had huge impacts on defense. Just good point of attack defense, and Jokic did a damn good job on the interior. Obviously not blocking a million shots, but you know, getting in the way and shit. But this was a defensive team as well as an offensive team. And if you're going to talk about winning championships, I think it's dumb that we're making it one or the other. Here's how I will put it. This is the best way to put it in my personal opinion, because, you know, I'm the one who's saying it and I think I'm the shit. Offense is more difficult to be good at and do well. Therefore, people who are good at it and can do it well are valued more. Even defenders who are as good at defense as they could possibly be, like the Draymond Greens of the world, they still only get paid like $30 million like he does now, not genuine supermax money. You're really not going to get supermax money unless you are a very, very good offensive player. And in general, if you're known as like a very good defender and not that impactful at all on offense, people don't think you're that good. And frankly, I don't really either. If you're like a Matisse Thybulle of the world, or Ben Simmons now, I just don't think your impact is that significant if you're going to hinder an NBA offense to that degree. But offense being harder means that defense is a little bit more achievable. Being a very good defender, having a very good defensive team, that can be achieved simply from a decent scheme and discipline. Like the Chicago Bulls, for example. As I just mentioned, they were a top 5 defense last year. Do you think they have top 5 defensive personnel? Because they sure as shit don't. So if you want to elevate your team, make your team better, in ways that are more achievable than, Kevin Durant's mid-range pull-up helping you win, then you do that and you go for that more bottom-of-the-barrel stuff, and that can get you something like the Miami Heat, who made their way to the NBA Finals. The Miami Heat did not make their way to the Finals with pretty offense. They had it a little bit here or there, especially obviously in the Bucks series. But for the most part, it was grit and grind shit. It was defense and winning the game in the margins, not just putting points on the board. Now, then they ran into the Nuggets, who could do both, and them not being able to put points on the board mattered because, as I said, it's not one or the other, it's both. But if you want to elevate a less talented team, focus on defense. That's a great way to do that. If you're going to be a super talented team, you're probably going to have very, very good offense, and that's going to help you win. Being really fucking hard to stop obviously helps the team be good. The object of the game, believe it or not, is to score more points than the other team. And I think it is easier, more achievable to stop the opponent more so than it is to actually put those points up, because it's just more skillful to be very, very good at shooting and all that. I'm not sitting here saying that there's not skill to defense, because someone I mentioned earlier, Draymond Green, is a perfect example of how much skill there is in defense. But, you get what I'm saying. Being very good at defense is easier than being Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker. But at the same time, generally speaking, throughout history, you need those Kevin Durants or Devin Bookers, and I guess I'll be nice and say Bradley Beal as well. Everything is a mix. Basketball is not one or the other, and the way that people talk about it, it bothers me so much when shit like this happens. I don't know if I was necessarily as coherent as I would have liked to have been throughout this. Maybe I nailed it, maybe I didn't. I honestly have no idea, but I had a ramble to get out. Just overall point, defense matters, offense matters, and honestly, who cares?